There is a truth about some women that most men will never dare to see, because it shatters the illusion that gives their life meaning. But what if the thing that comforts you is also the very thing that destroys you? Today, we will rip off the mask and show you the face behind the charm. What man fears most is not the cruelty of the world, but the collapse of the illusions that shield him from it. And no illusion is more sacred, more heavily guarded, than the idealized image of woman. From the earliest mythologies to the modern parades of social virtue, she has been draped in sanctity, painted as the pure, nurturing opposite of man's chaos and war. But beneath that veil lies a truth too raw for most to bear. Woman is not a moral ideal. She is a force of nature. This distinction is everything. Nature does not apologize. It does not weep for the weak. It moves, shifts, devours, and blooms according to power, not pity. The storm does not care who it drenches. The lioness does not feel guilt when she tears flesh from bone. Likewise, some women move through the world not as saints, but as storms disguised in silk. Their beauty does not soften the reality of their instinct. It only cloaks it. The world, however, teaches man to kneel. He is told she is divine, a moral compass, a gentle guiding star. But she is not here to guide. She is here to expand, conquer, protect her genetic future. Her instincts run deeper than the stories we craft about her. Man foolishly projects virtue where there is only will, and he does this because he must believe. He must believe she is better, or else his entire desire collapses into shame. But what happens when she is not a guiding star but a consuming flame? The non-AV man cannot fathom this possibility. His entire emotional edifice depends on her being inherently kind, nurturing, selfless. It is not simply that he wants this to be true. His soul requires it. He needs her to be his redeemer. And so, when she acts with indifference, with calculation, with dominance rather than deference, he is not merely confused, he is shattered. His God has shown her mortality. The more perceptive man begins to notice a pattern. He watches how some women behave not according to any moral code, but according to necessity, advantage, and instinctual strategy. He sees how softness can be a mask, how vulnerability can be performed, and how morality is sometimes used as a tool to restrain others rather than oneself. What he thought was goodness, he begins to suspect is only cunning. But this realization doesn't bring peace. It brings disorientation, perhaps even bitterness, for he must now confront the possibility that she never loved him as he loved her. But rather, she played a role, one written by instinct and directed by opportunity. To speak this truth is heresy. To utter that not all women are moral creatures, but strategic beings, just as men are, is to threaten the entire sentimental order of society. It is to burn down the myth that shields man from the abyss of his own desire. For once he knows she is not divine, he must ask himself why he yearns for her worship. Yet this is not an attack, it is a liberation. To see woman as nature is to respect her, not as a porcelain statue, but as a volcanic force. You do not moralize the volcano. You do not scold the ocean tide. You understand them, you anticipate them, you respect their power. Likewise, to understand woman is not to hate her, but to stop being crushed by the weight of false ideals. Nature is not evil. It is only raw, and rawness terrifies those who rely on comfort. There is a certain kind of woman, undeniably intelligent, instinctually dominant, who has long understood this. She is not moved by sentimental appeals. She does not need your poetry or your pedestal. She measures, calculates, and selects. She may smile, but behind the smile is a scale. Behind the tears, a judgment. She does not seek to be worshipped. She seeks to conquer without appearing to conquer. And in this, she succeeds, precisely because the men around her still believe she is something other than nature. They believe she is virtue embodied, and so they disarm themselves in her presence. They confess, expose, kneel, and in kneeling, lose the very power she was testing them for. She does not want a subject, she wants a sovereign. But she will never tell him that. She will simply dismiss the weak and draw near the strong, all while draped in the illusion of moral purity. Thus, man is caught in a paradox. The more he believes in her goodness, the more he becomes prey to her power. He is too noble to protect himself, too reverent to question her intentions. He calls this love. But is it love, or is it blindness dressed in adoration? The philosophers and poets of old whispered warnings through metaphor. They wrote of sirens, witches, enchantresses. Not because women are demons, because some wield their femininity like a spell. They understood what modern man has forgotten. Not all beauty is benevolent. Not all softness is sincere. And not all women are innocent lambs awaiting rescue. Some are hunters disguised as prey, queens wrapped in peasant cloth, empresses of subtle domination. And it is precisely those women who rise while men around them remain asleep within their fantasies. Love, as it is spoken of by the herd, is a soft thing. It is a place of safety, of giving, of mutual tenderness. It is painted in soft colors and sung in lullabies. But there exists another form of love, older, colder, and more real. A love that does not bloom from sentiment, but from instinct, hunger, and the will to power. In this form, love is not a union, a transaction. Not all women wield this version of love, but some do, and they wield it not as a gift, but as a weapon. What is seduction, if not the art of camouflage? It is the mastery of appearances, the science of creating desire while withholding substance. It is performance dressed as sincerity. The seductress does not fall into love. She orchestrates it. She studies the language of longing, learns the notes that stir a man's hunger, and then plays them as a musician would a harp. But her goal is not harmony. It is leverage. Where the nav a man believes he is dancing, she is choreographing. This is not about sexual pleasure. That is far too animal, far too obvious. The woman who seduces with intention does not want your body. She wants your mind, your obedience, your identity. Her touch is not erotic alone. It is psychological. She wraps herself around your dreams, your projections, your unspoken needs, and becomes the very thing you have always searched for. She becomes your answer. And in doing so, she becomes your master. She knows that the most effective chain is invisible. So she does not control with commands, but with suggestion. She does not demand, she implies. She becomes your mirror, your muse, your salvation. And once you believe she is all those things, you give yourself freely. You offer not only your heart, but your judgment, your boundaries, your self-respect. You become clay, and she the sculptor. To see this dynamic for what it is requires a brutal honesty, an honesty that most men are not prepared to face. They want to believe in fairy tales, in destined meetings and magical connections. But connection in this domain is often a trap. The more deeply you feel, the more deeply you are owned. Seductress counts not on your lust, but on your loneliness. She does not awaken your passion. She awakens your need for meaning, and then she becomes the meaning. This is where her power lies, not in her beauty, but in her ability to reflect back to you your own desires. She studies the weakness behind your eyes, the insecurities in your laughter, the cracks in your armor. Then she becomes the balm for those wounds, the soothing whisper in the night, the one who understands. But this understanding is tactical. It is not love. It is leverage disguised as intimacy. The man, drunk on his own fantasy, begins to revolve around her. He alters his behavior, adjusts his values, silences his instincts. He tells himself it is love, it is submission. His independence fades slowly, subtly, under the illusion that he is choosing it. But he is not choosing. He is being chosen, shaped, refined into something less dangerous, more manageable, easier to keep. She rewards obedience with affection and punishes defiance with distance, not with rage. No, that would expose the game. Her punishments are silent, a cold shoulder, a delayed reply, an inexplicable withdrawal. And like a dog longing for its master's touch, he scrambles to win back her warmth. Thus, the leash tightens without him ever seeing it. He does not feel trapped. He feels desperate to please. This strategy is ancient. It predates language. It is not taught in words, but inherited through survival. The seductress may not even be aware of her weapon, for it lies beneath thought, in the realm of instinct and intuition. But its effects are undeniable. Men who once stood tall are reduced to shells, walking in circles around a woman who never openly asked for anything, yet somehow took everything. There are those who will defend her, who will claim she is simply reacting to a world of male aggression, that her manipulation is a defense, not a crime. But this is another mask. The idea that one cannot be both victim and tyrant is naive. Many who appear wounded wield their wounds as swords. Many who act small do so only to sneak beneath the guard of giants. The man who awakens to this reality is not necessarily bitter. He is simply clear. He begins to see love not as something that always uplifts, but something that can enslave. He sees how seduction can be used as strategy, how charm can become currency, and how some women do not seek to join a man, but to possess him. He learns that love, when stripped of illusions, often looks less like freedom and more like control dressed in softness. Man does not fall because of cruelty. He falls because of comfort, not the comfort of warm hands or shared laughter, but the deeper, more dangerous comfort, the comfort of illusion. The illusion that she loves you purely, the illusion that you are chosen because of your essence, the illusion that she, unlike the rest, means every word, every smile, every vow. It is this softness, this dream, that lulls him into blindness. And in this blindness, he mistakes submission for loyalty, manipulation for affection, and silence for depth. He does not see her clearly, not because she is hidden, but because he refuses to look. To see would mean to risk everything he built upon her image. To question her is to question himself, his value, his worth, his manhood. The illusion becomes sacred, not because it is true, but because it is necessary. He needs her to be good. He needs her to be different from the others. And so he bends the truth until it fits the shape of his desire. Desire is never neutral. It distorts. It colors perception with longing and fear. The man who wants love more than truth will always be its victim. He will see her coldness as mystery, her distance as independence, her disloyalty as confusion. And all the while she will continue, calm, composed, unbothered, because she knows he cannot escape the illusion he has wrapped around her. She does not need to convince him. He convinces himself. That is the true art of power, not domination through force, but through belief. Illusions are not passive things. They are active sedatives. They keep men from rebellion, from self-possession, from awakening. The illusion that a woman is pure, nurturing, incapable of deception. This illusion keeps men docile. It keeps them chasing approval, apologizing for their instincts, doubting their suspicions. And every time they betray their inner voice for the sake of peace, the illusion tightens its grip. There is a kind of man who would rather be destroyed than disillusioned. He clings to the idea that she is different, that she would never use him, never lie to him, never leave him. Even as the evidence piles up, even as her actions speak louder than her carefully curated words, he remains loyal, not to her, but to the fantasy he has of her. His loyalty is not love. It is fear, the fear of emptiness, fear of having no one to dream about. And so he chooses the dream, even as it poisons him. When this man is betrayed, it is not her betrayal that breaks him. It is the collapse of the image. He mourns not the woman, but the version of her he invented. The one who saw him, loved him, protected him from his own darkness. That version never existed, but he cannot admit this, so he blames himself, rationalizes her actions, says things like, she's just confused, or she's hurt, or she's not like this with others. He invents reasons to keep the illusion alive, even after it has destroyed him. This is the deepest kind of self-betrayal, to know something is false and still bow before it. The man who does this is not weak. He is addicted. Addicted to hope, to sentiment, to the idea that someone will finally see him for who he is and love him completely. And the seductress, whether consciously or not, feeds this addiction. She offers just enough truth to keep the illusion breathing. A tender glance here, a vulnerable story there. But it is a drip, never a river. It is the illusion of depth, not depth itself. Truth is painful. To see clearly is to suffer. But illusion is worse, because it offers no path forward, only a slow decay. The man who breaks free from illusion does not do so easily. He must kill the ideal he has worshipped. He must burn the pedestal he placed her on. And in doing so, he is left with nothing, no comfort, no softness, no dream. Only reality. But reality, though cruel, does not lie. It does not seduce. It simply is. There is a brutal freedom in finally seeing her not as angel, not as devil, but as human, as complex, strategic, instinct-driven, as someone who may care, but not unconditionally, who may love, but not without cost. This is not cynicism, it is sobriety. To love without illusion is to love without chains. It is to see her clearly and still choose. Not from need, but from strength. But most men are not strong enough for this kind of love. They prefer the cage made of flowers. They prefer to believe that she is incapable of harm, even as they bleed in her presence. The illusion is safer, the lie is warmer, and the truth, though liberating, remains a cold and distant echo they hope to never fully hear. Devotion is not always what it seems. The man who kneels in worship does not realize that he is often building his own cage. He calls it love. He calls it loyalty. But beneath these noble names, there is a surrender, a quiet forfeiting of self, disguised as something holy. Devotion, when unexamined, becomes a contract of subjugation, and nowhere is this more cunningly concealed than in the man's devotion to a woman who knows her power. In this theater of love, he believes he is the strong one. He provides, he protects, he sacrifices. But what he does not see is that his very sacrifice makes him malleable. The more he gives, the more she learns. She watches what he will trade for affection. She calculates what part of his identity he is willing to discard to keep her presence near. And the deeper his devotion grows, the more she shapes him, not by force, but by suggestion, implication, silence. The leash is velvet, the cage is perfumed, and he does not recognize that he has lost the freedom to walk away. To devote oneself is not inherently weak. But when devotion becomes identity, it becomes dangerous. The man who defines himself by the woman he loves begins to orbit her, like a moon around a planet. He loses his gravity, his center. His decisions are no longer made for truth, for principle, for inner alignment. They are made to please. And once he seeks to please above all else, he becomes predictable. And predictability in the world of power is weakness. Some women, not all, but the few who understand the deeper movements of control, know this well. They reward submission with intimacy. They reward silence with approval. They train the man not with cruelty, but with warmth and withdrawal. Like a clever trainer molding an animal, they condition his behavior by controlling access to the very thing he craves, emotional validation. And because he thinks he is loved, he does not see that he is being shaped. He is told that love means compromise, that sacrifice is noble, that putting her first is what good men do. But the deeper truth is this: what he calls compromise is often concession. What he calls love is often dependency. What he calls loyalty is often fear. He fears losing her, not because she completes him, but because he has tied his worth to her gaze. Without her approval, he feels invisible. And so he performs, he censors, he conforms, all while telling himself this is what love demands. But love, real love, does not demand the death of the self. It does not require the extinguishing of instinct. It does not turn a sovereign man into a domesticated pet. Yet this is what happens to many who mistake devotion for virtue. They become smaller versions of themselves to fit within the frame she prefers. They stop challenging, stop asserting, stop questioning. Because every time they do, they risk withdrawal, and the fear of her distance outweighs their need for dignity. The woman who operates from instinct, who sees love as a negotiation of power, recognizes this dynamic early. She knows that the more he invests, the more she can withdraw. She knows that his fear of abandonment is the very chain that binds him. She need not raise her voice or issue ultimatums. Her silence is enough. Her detachment becomes a weapon. She does not have to fight him. She only has to disappear temporarily and watch him rush back with more offerings. In this way, devotion becomes a transaction masked as transcendence. He believes he is being noble. She knows he is being trained. And this training, over time, creates a man who is loyal not to her truth, but to her approval. He loses the ability to speak against her, to assert himself, to challenge what does not feel right. He trades his masculine edge for emotional survival. He thinks he is keeping the relationship alive. What he is really keeping alive is his own enslavement. The tragedy is that most men do not realize this until they are discarded. Once their usefulness expires, once their devotion becomes uninteresting, they are abandoned. Not with malice, but with indifference. And it is this indifference that wounds most deeply. Not rage, not betrayal, but the realization that all their loyalty, all their sacrifice, all their effort meant less than they imagined. They thought they were irreplaceable. They were not. They thought love would protect them. It did not. They thought their devotion gave them security. It only made them disposable. It is only after the fall that clarity begins to form. They look back and see the signs, the tests, the manipulations, the slow erosion of their spirit. And they ask themselves how they let it happen. The answer is always the same. They believed that devotion was the highest virtue. They believed that to give themselves completely was the ultimate expression of love. But they did not understand that in the wrong hands, devotion is not love, it is currency. And once it has been spent, the one who gave it is left empty, wondering when his own soul became someone else's possession without ever noticing the theft. What men call love is often little more than a fevered dream, a sanctuary for their insecurities, a cathedral built from illusions and desperate longings. And some women, those who understand the silent machinery of desire, enter this cathedral not as worshippers, but as architects. They reshape its walls to serve their will. They do not conquer with violence, but with softness. Not with commands, but with implication. They weaponize beauty, silence, and tenderness. And the man, believing himself loved, hands over the keys to his spirit. It is not hatred that enslaves him. It is comfort. It is the lie told gently, the illusion kissed into his soul until he mistakes it for truth. He becomes loyal to a mask, blind to the power danced beneath every whispered word, every glance, every moment of withdrawal. And when she disappears, when the illusion collapses, he does not mourn her. He mourns the version of himself that only existed through her eyes. He is wise, he will not become bitter. He will become awakened. He will see that not all love liberates. Some love seduces the mind into captivity. He will see that not every smile is innocent, not every woman pure, and not every devotion holy. And perhaps with this clarity, he will reclaim what he lost in the name of affection, his sovereignty. For in the end, it is not about blaming woman, nor hating her. It is about seeing her clearly, without illusion, and choosing strength over sedation. The man who survives this knowledge is no longer a boy in search of a mother. He becomes a storm unto himself. And from that place, he may finally meet love, not as a beggar, not as a believer, but as an equal who cannot be bought, broken, or blinded.